So moving on, ladies and gentlemen, we all know that voice and audio as mediums are intuitive, growing, and sticky platforms with huge scope for innovation. But there are several unanswered questions that come in the way of marketeers adopting these mediums. And to address this pain point, MMA is launching a podcast series called Vox, which is an MMA Voice and Audio Council initiative in collaboration with IVM Podcasts. So ladies and gentlemen, without any further ado, let's unveil the podcast series with a short video.
Hello and welcome to MMA's Vox podcast. This will be a series of episodes covering various topics on the business of audio and video in India. Did you know that there are more than 45,000 podcasts beaming out of India and that more than 25 million people are listening to it? Or that audio ads have a higher recall value than video? The audio and voice industry is disrupting content and marketing rapidly. More creators, brands, and platforms are pushing the envelope and learning every day. How do you keep up? How do you ensure you're not left behind?
The MMA India Vox podcast series is a part of the MMA Voice and Audio Council powered by IVM. As we all know, voice and audio as mediums are sticky, intuitive, and rapidly growing with huge scope for innovation. But there are several unanswered questions which is coming in the way of marketers using the medium. Every fortnight, we will meet practitioners and experts who have succeeded in using voice and audio as a medium and learn from them on how they innovated, overcame challenges, and the kind of problems they solved using the medium. We will also break down for you what is happening in the world of podcasts, audio streaming, and voice technology. This is that one pod you need to stay on top of to be up to speed on all things voice and audio in India.
Hi, I'm Karthik Nagarajan.
And I'm Monica Khurana.
And you can listen to MMA's Vox podcast every fortnight on the IVM app, website, or wherever you get your podcasts from.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together for the launch of our Vox podcast. And on that note, what you're going to witness now is a recording of one of the podcasts, which will be a part of the series and is being represented by our council members themselves who are driving this initiative. Hence, for this very interesting session on innovative use of voice and audio in advertising, please join me in welcoming Mr. Karthik Nagarajan, Chief Content Officer, Wavemaker, and Mr. Anil Vishwanathan, Senior Marketing Director, Mondelez, India. Let's put our hands together for our speakers, everybody. Thank you. Over to you, gentlemen.
Check.
Hi everyone, thanks so much. Very excited, to be doing this, Anil, the launching this podcast, which we are putting together as the Voice and Audio Council of MMA, in collaboration, of course, with IVM, who's producing this for us. But more excited to do this with you as a live episode, because I know you're extremely passionate about the medium and about voice and about experimenting and pushing the envelope in general. So wanted to probably start with asking you, when it comes to voice and audio as a playground for brands, how excited are you? How do you feel about the whole thing?
So before I begin, happy to be here. Obviously a bit curious to see how a live podcast works, because I need to almost imagine that there isn't an audience, right? So very happy to be here. To your question, Karthik, from a perspective of Mondelez and from a practitioner perspective, we go where the consumer is. And when we look at data and we see what the consumer is doing, we are seeing two things. One is audio as a medium picking up. We've always seen audio as a medium being very active through radio and FM. But in the post-digital avatar and post-COVID, we are seeing a spurt of activity on audio and people getting more and more comfortable listening to audio. There seems to be a lot of interest coming out of the immersiveness of the medium. There's a lot of interest coming through because of the kind of experts who are there in the area of interest for the listener. And there seems to be a fair amount of now followership, depending on what are your, what your interest area is. And there seems to be a feeling that the medium is possibly providing a fair amount of expert context and knowledge as well. So expertise, immersiveness are possibly a couple of things that are picking up. Of course, the other aspect, which is music and entertainment, and really specialists like Spotify and the way they're personalizing and they're able to curate content on a real-time basis, is making audio very interesting. So long answer short, a lot of consumer interest in audio. Equally, as consumers are getting more and more comfortable in digital, voice-enabling engagement and voice-enabling usage of digital platforms is also equally exploding. So I think on both these sides, what interests us as marketers is the fact that consumers are going there. And what makes me interested as a marketer is the fact that there's lots to experiment out there as well. So I mean, those are the two reasons why this seems an interesting area to experiment with.
Yeah. I'll come to the lots to experiment part, especially, as Mondelez, you've done so much in voice and audio. But before that, I love what you said about the expertise and learning perspective. And it takes me back to, I think in peak lockdown, I don't think I would have survived, and many of us would have, without the company of some of our most favorite podcasts, right? So, when we look at that, I think one of the common misconceptions I would probably say is also that, is it big enough in India, right? And I think most people in the industry will probably tell us that there are probably about 25 to 30 million people who are listening to audio content, which is not music, right? Today in India, which is a sizable number. If I remember right, I think this is where Facebook was probably in 2014 or so, right? When it comes to brands' place in audio, especially non-music audio, how do you feel about the quantum of this market? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think both in terms of numbers and in terms of hence measurement, it becomes an interesting topic of debate, especially in the industry forums, primarily coming out of the kind of the gossipy nature of cross-platform, which is more important, which is getting more prevalent. So we're going to divert money from here to there. If you leave that part aside, I think, as I said, if consumers are going there, we'd love to experiment and understand, where this goes. From a scale perspective, it is picking up, as I said. In a relative sense, when it comes to something like reach or awareness, obviously it will trail and it will continue to trail. And I don't think at this stage we are looking at the platform from a view of adding reach or unduplicated reach in that matter. But we see a great opportunity on engagement, a great opportunity to drive a kind of a multi-touch point approach to reaching our consumer. We've always felt that we need to be there at all consumer touch points, because that's when we are able to kind of land our brand proposition in an integrated way. So in that context, it is starting to emerge as an important touch point, which we cannot ignore. So I think it's reached a scale, at least with a set of consumers, where we can no longer ignore. For businesses like ours, where we have a portfolio of brands, there are some brands which are by nature niche, where we are also experimenting and trying to figure out. And it is not insignificant in the context of niche brands. And of course, in the context of the entire startup ecosystem and digital first brands and kind of insurgent brands, definitely meaningful in that sense. So my advocacy, and as I tell my teams as well, to say, look beyond just the numbers and evaluate the medium for what it can do for you, beyond just pure play reach. I think in the previous session, I saw an interesting comment made by Diptakirti. He was talking about how over a period of time, in the way, especially the post-digital world, the consumers want things to be less intrusive. Right. So I think in the journey of making ourselves less intrusive, we'd have to see how do we use our mediums in an intelligent way to drive engagement. So I think that's the interesting part for us to take away as marketing practitioners.
Hey. You spoke earlier about experimenting with the medium, right? Going beyond engagement. I feel one of the places that voice and audio sort of lends itself very, very well is personalizing this engagement, right? And I think of all the campaigns Mondelez has done, one of my most favorites is is the secret message in a playlist that you did for Silk, right? How far would you go for love? And basically customizing the music experience for the person who's sending it and also for the person who's listening to it, right? Campaigns like that, how do you feel about the personalization angle of it and the kind of engagement you're able to in a way bring the brand experience to life? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think from a consumer standpoint, just the seamlessness of personalization that something like a Spotify is able to offer, or to that matter, most of the new audio platforms are able to offer, makes it really interesting, right? It makes the feed feel as if the platform knows me so well, knows my mood so well at this point in time that they're able to predict what I'd like to listen to. That's what makes this medium, say, for example, much more interesting than a totally randomized input stream that comes in from, say, listening to a station. So I think, to me, that personalization is quite important. As a broad level from a consumer standpoint, across mediums, you're seeing personalization becoming very, very important. And hence, as marketers, the end state is me sending a personalized ad to Karthik in the evening when he wants to eat dark chocolate, right? I mean, that's what we'd like to get to. And the end point is not too far away. So I think, hence in that context, personalization is definitely very, very interesting. And because we are chasing it as a strategy from a marketing and a media standpoint, and of course, Wavemaker and Ogilvy, as part of our agency ecosystem, are partners here. We obviously take signals in, right, to understand where is the personalization happening and at what context, and how can we bring in the brand idea there. So, that's where Silk came from. So Silk, is a brand that is naturally, has been associating with music over a while. It has a strong, distinctive audio asset in its jingle. So we've been always wanting to think of music as a genre or a platform or an interest area that we want to own for our consumers. In Valentine's Day, we realized that it's the wish of every Valentine to be gifted something that is personalized from his or her partner. So again, that's kind of the core consumer insight. And then here comes Spotify saying, you know what, we can give you something which is a personalized playlist. So I think that is one perspective. And the brand idea was all about secret messages. I think one of the cuteness of Valentine is the fact that you're able to express it in a secret way. That's kind of made popular in the movies as well, but in real life as well, right? A secret message has the cuteness of it, which made the whole secret message idea, this Valentine, go quite viral. And the way we were able to leverage that idea and take it into multiple platforms. I think when the idea travels through multiple platforms, from a Spotify playlist to a personalized outdoor to a video message, and to a pack, then it all comes together in a very integrated way. And that's where the the idea became very popular. We had more than 1 million pack scans just in a matter of a few days, which then kind of reinforces the power of personalization and the opportunity that audio provides, because personalization is becoming such an important element of an experience in audio.
Yeah, I think if you were to look around us, there'll probably be like 100 brands today which would want to stand for music, but very few brands would be able to actually bring out that as a product experience, as a brand experience, as a content experience, etc. Which is why I love that campaign. And I think it's also important, since you spoke about experimenting with this medium, to play around and bring that to life and probably learn from that as well. And for me, the brand that I probably love most from what it stands for and how it has built itself over the last 3 years or so is 5-star. With a variety of things you've done. And one of the most exciting thing was the Do Nothing campaign that you did with Google Assistant, isn't it? Tell us about how that sort of came to life, and what were your sort of learnings from that?
So again, I think as we, and this is kind of a broader theme beyond just voice and audio, and it comes to the way we try and curate our ecosystem, is if you have a strong brand idea, and then bring in all our partners into the room to say, where do we take this idea? What do you think? Clearly, this whole attitude of do nothing, which is something which is very interesting for the Gen Z, and all the consumer work we are doing is a very interesting tension point between the pressure to do a lot of things and a brand says do nothing for a while. We clearly felt that it's quirky, and we said, how do we kind of build the quirkiness? Because on advertising, it gets very difficult to build that quirkiness. You can't experience the quirkiness. So when we were bouncing these ideas, of course, Google came and said, you know what, there's Google Assistant, and that's voice, and we have not tried integrating a brand into it before, but we are happy to offer you. And I think Ogilvy and Wavemaker and Google came together, and as we were brainstorming, I think it was a very interesting idea to say, what if there was a do-nothing version of Google Assistant, and how may it respond to a question differently from what a typical response would be. And that's what we felt, that it was a very quirky idea, and for something that's not been done before. Google has not, and Google Voice has not customized and worked for a brand filter ever before. We said, let's try. It took a lot of time, took almost 6 months. The team persisted, and I think what you got is, again, a great manifestation of when you have a strong idea and you want to build engagement around it. And I hence go back to the point that once you think about building an engagement around a strong brand idea, then some of these mediums offer you an opportunity to engage in a seamless manner, which the consumer also finds it interesting, because this is the way they use the medium anyway, so it's not intrusive. It's not that I put on Google Assistant and I get an ad of 5-star. So this is something which is quirky enough for me to take notice of the brand and also engage with it. So that's what made it very interesting.
No, I think one of probably the most difficult arts in marketing is to, like you said, bring quirky to life, right? I don't think any brand has done it better than 5-star. Talking of the challenges that voice and audio sort of solves for, right? Especially marketing challenges. I think one of them is also, we spoke about personalization. Another is also to, in a country like India especially, right? When different consumers, the diversity in our consumers are so, it's so colorful. For us to bring this experience to life in different parts of the world differently, especially through experiences, is very important. And I'm reminded of, what Fuse did from a programmatic campaign, whereas depending on the region or the kind of music the person listens to or the language that the person is comfortable with, bringing the same branded communication to life differently, right? So when it comes to programmatic, especially in audio, do you see this now being a very important part of dynamic content, when you look at the overall lay of the land?
Yeah, if you remember the point that I was making around the end state, which is kind of every input that I put out is personalized. The only way we can do it is in a programmatic way, right? So I think that will provide the kind of scale for you to ramp up and do this on a day in, day out basis. So to that extent, it's a definitely important piece. And what we experienced through this, the whole hunger campaign with Cadbury Fuse was the ability to do that at low cost. And the cleanness of receiving the signal and able to adapt the creative to it seemed very seamless. Again, I think so, less intrusive, low cost, and very effective, because the consumer is listening in that language, in that context. So the message also comes in that context. It just makes it much more powerful. So we saw a very strong improvement in both the core kind of consideration measures, but also in terms of effectiveness of the piece of creative. So I think signal clarity seems to be working very well in the case of audio. I don't know whether there is a particular case, or is it something that is consistently you guys might know, and the industry experts might be better well versed. And now I'm seeing many brands do it. So it's no longer, it seems like definitely something that is the power of the medium that more brands can possibly leverage, because I do see it being used by many brands on a regular basis.
We spoke about measurement a little earlier, Anil, and when you look at these 3-4 campaigns we spoke about, of course, the objectives are very different. What you wanted out of them are very different. What's your take on, what measurement offers today, right? Especially when it comes to voice and audio. And what's your larger philosophy towards how one should, and I'm sure this question is there in many people's mind, how one should measure the efficacy or the success of campaigns like these?
I think at a broad level, we are very clear that there needs to be last mile attribution, and everything that we do should not be an end in itself, but leads to a business objective at the end. And to that extent, and I'm sure quite a few organizations are doing that as well, investing in kind of market mix modeling. So you are very clear in terms of clear attribution in terms of whether it's moving business or not, and not just happy with kind of a brand lift kind of a study only. So I think we are quite clear that all the inputs that we're putting in are measured on a regular basis. We have had strong partnerships here with our partners, research partners, as well as agency partners who are able to bring that level of detail. We also did some experimental work a few years back between Nielsen and Facebook, and we saw some very good attribution, especially of digital work where you need faster feedback, right? We can't wait for a year to get feedback. So I think there are solutions if you want to search for it. So I think seek and you shall find kind of an approach we will take, and we have taken in the past. So we take it upon ourselves to measure. I think, as I said earlier, I mean, when you start thinking about measuring across media, that's an industry problem, right? It's still getting evolved, especially in the context of awareness and the fact that the ways of measurement aren't standardized. And we are getting there. There are conversations on towards getting to a better place than where we are. My advocacy to my teams is, we have a broader, much larger at an annual level linkage to our strategic goals. And then I think we do find that even on things like Do Nothing Assistant, we are able to mount studies that give us a sense of whether it is working or not working. Right. So I think when it comes to something like a brand measure or engagement, we find that it's easier to measure. When it comes to reach and awareness, it still is quite subjective. So then it becomes a little bit of a problem. But then we rely on our agency partners there. We take their wisdom, take their judgment in some of these. As we build a kind of a multimedia reach stack, we go with both numbers, the simulation, and a little bit of judgment on top. That's the way we need to take measurement. We can't be like very, very obtuse about the way we use measurement.
Now, in closing, I don't know if you sent a playlist during Valentine's Day to anyone with a secret message, but I know you're a big connoisseur of audio content. If someone were to look at your playlist, what would they find? What are you listening to these days?
I think, as I said, from a Spotify is definitely it. And, my daughter isn't old enough to have her own account. So the challenge I have is to ensure, the trouble is that I get my daughter's feed, which I don't like. So we then finally eventually agreed that we have to separate our accounts. So there is an interesting anecdote there. So my daughter is much more hooked on than I am. But definitely Spotify is a very important part. But I think, as I said, I think podcasts are emerging as a big source of perspective for us as well. And there are enough and more areas from a business perspective, from a socioeconomic perspective, from a socio-cultural perspective, quite a few. So the ones like Pivot, Seen and the Unseen, revisionist history, a few examples of consumer behavior, what's emerging on the tech side, which will be on my playlist.
I'm sure you'll add Vox podcast to that list as well very soon.
Absolutely.
But I understand the challenge you're facing. In fact, the end of the year wrap for Spotify, I have a 5-year-old at home. So one of the things that Spotify told me was you're the only person who listened to Blackstrat Blues after Frozen. Again, that user behavior is not seen anywhere else. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But Anil, thank you so much. I couldn't have asked for a better guest to sort of kickstart the Vox podcast. Thank you for sharing your experiences with us.
Thank you, Karthik. Thank you for having me. I don't know whether the audience fell asleep listening to the podcast because it was a curious experience. But it'll be good to get feedback. But it was nice interacting. Thank you.
Thank you. And you guys can, I think formally the podcast launches on the 25th of May. And I think at some point you'll have a QR code with which you can get more details. Stay tuned, and I'm sure you'll enjoy this series. Thank you so much.